Hello dreamers, today we'll be talking about the topic that holds much meaning to me in my heart. For those that was following me for a very long time, I started really dissecting Warframe after a video talking about Shattering Impact. I believe back then no one really cared to know how it worked, or at least didn't know that it worked differently from what most would think by reading based on the description. The video got a pretty decent amount of views and subscribers, which ultimately made me do more Warframe nerdy stuff. So today I'm going to share with you again why this mechanic is better than you think, and in what conditions if you want to strip an enemy's armor you would want to use Corrosive, and in what conditions you would want to use Shattering Impact's mechanics instead. By the way, if I sound like I'm a lot quieter than usual, it's because I'm recording this at night and I believe my sister is next door. She just came back from Singapore, so I don't want to wake her. Now, I didn't just suddenly want to make this video. There's a few reasons why I feel like now is a good time to talk about this topic. One of it is because this mod, the Amalgam Argonak metal auger, came out, and now Shattering Impact is no longer the only mod that has that mechanic. We will be trying to confirm for Wiki if Shattering Impact and this Amalgam mod stacks, and if they do, find out in what condition will it outshine Corrosive Procs. First off, let's do a quick explanation on Shattering Impact for those that are new or did not watch my really old video about it years ago. So Shattering Impact is a common mod that states impact damage from melee attack reduces enemies' armor by 6. Now the problem with that description is that it's not very clear. A lot of people thought that it needs to be an impact proc for it to work, but it doesn't. Any melee weapon that has impact damage will cause it to trigger every single time you hit, even if the impact damage is really little. So in other words, most melee weapons will work except for those pure elemental types. The more interesting fact about this mod is that it does not reduce the current armor of an enemy. Instead, it is on the base armor of that enemy. What this means is that, for example, a butcher has a base armor of 5. Shattering Impact will reduce 6 armor per hit, so no matter what level that butcher gets, you will always strip his entire armor completely in one hit. Even if technically a level 150 butcher has a lot of armor, because the mechanics works directly on the base armor and not its current armor, and that's what makes the Shattering Impact not entirely useless. Now with the new Amalgam mod, the Amalgam Argonak metal auger, you will think that you can break armors twice as fast if you were to use it together with Shattering Impact, because they both reduce 6 armor, so that would be 12 armors per hit, but only not exactly. Before we even start anything, I just want to make sure of something, because I feel like the dual daggers did not get much love in this game. So maybe, just maybe, daggers also means double daggers. So I just have to give that a try. Sadly, nothing. Daggers just means dagger and not dual daggers. But seriously, I think dual daggers look really cool. It's just too bad I haven't found any real good reason to use the dual daggers. So anyway, I tested it with 2 different dual daggers just to double check. Okay, now that I'm slightly disappointed, let's start testing if Shattering Impact and that Amalgam mod even stacks. On my first try, I decided to use the Lancer as the test subject. It has a nice rounded 100 base armor. I made a small mistake by using the Dark Dagger because it doesn't have impact damage, so it wouldn't work with the Shattering Impact, so we couldn't really test it. So instead I have to use the Sheave next. To be honest, there weren't many other options if you don't count the different kind of zaws that you can make for a dagger. The Sheave is actually really good because it has good slash damage and status chance. Now when counting the hits, I realized something was wrong, and so I did it again. The problem here is that if the Lancer has 100 armor, I shouldn't have been able to remove all its armor with only 6 hits. Because if you take 100 divided by 12, it's at least 8 to 9 hits. So I started mapping out how the numbers would look like after every hit. So if I'm using 2 mods, it's minus 12 armors per hit. On paper, it would take at least 9 hits to strip everything. I started to try mapping out different possibilities and scenarios. For example, what if it removes a total of 18 armor instead? And guess what? It shows that it would work after 6 hits. At this point, I'm convinced that one of the mods is double dipping. So instead of reducing 6 from Shattering Impact and another 6 from the new mod, one of them is applying another extra 6 armor reduction. So the next thing to do is not to jump into conclusion so soon. I then decide to test it with the Heavy Gunner. Heavy Gunner has a base armor of 500. This means if I want to strip everything out, I will need to deal at least 28 hits. This is according to what I just figured out, which is the mods actually remove 18 armor instead of 12. If it were 12, we will need to do about 42 hits. To my surprise, again, it took only 24 hits. So something fishy is obviously happening. I start to doubt what I know. Like maybe there's some change with the sheaves while I was gone for the past 7 months, so I decided to change daggers. There's really only the ceramic dagger and heat dagger left to check with, and I went with the ceramic dagger. The dagger only has impact and puncher, so if anything that is a good thing because it makes things simpler. But well, again, I was shocked because this time instead of 42 hits or 24 hits, it took 28 hits to remove the Heavy Gunner's 500 base armor. Like, what the? Now 28 is also a good number because it's what we predicted the first time when it's double dipping and removing 18 armor instead of 12. But why didn't it work with the sheath? And remember, I used the same sheaves on the Lancer as well, and that gave me minus 18 armor. So something weird is happening. So I tried it again and again. I did 28 hits, but luckily while I was in denial, I tried the third time, and this time I hit way slower, hoping to catch or see something interesting. And from this, it took 42 hits. I didn't know what it meant at first. At some point, I even started investigating puncher procs since the ceramic dagger only has impact and puncher, and I didn't think it would be impact. And finally, I realized that the bleed is the thing that is triggering armor reduction. You might be wondering, but didn't you use a ceramic dagger which has no slash damage? How do you get the slash proc? Turns out the default combo has a guarantee slash proc. And that is why when I'm hitting a lot slower, I didn't get to do the combo, and so it took me 42 hits. So it is removing 12 armor per hit. So finally we found the culprit. Obviously after that I tried with toxin or gas procs, which also works, but it is only working because of the new Amalgam mod and not from Shattering Impact. So basically from every damage over time tick, you remove 6 armor. To say that it works like Shattering Impact is not really accurate because as you can see, this new mechanic is actually way better because it works with damage over time. Now I'm not going to lie, I don't think this is meant to work like this, just like how I don't think Breach Surge from my last video is supposed to trigger on DOT damage as well, which is why I'm kind of worried, to be honest, that DE may have forgotten or lost some parts of their older core programming, such that newer things are clashing with the older mechanics. If this is true and DE is really having trouble tracing back how the initial programming was made, that might explain why some very old known issues take so long to be fixed. For example, armor scaling. If you think about it, we have been using the same armor mechanics and armor scaling since day one, and it was never changed, not that I know of, this many years. There seem to be a lot of people wanting an endgame content, but what if they actually need to figure out these simple things first, and that is why it's taking so long. Okay, where were we? So now that we have solved the inconsistency, we can continue with other experiments to answer other questions, like which actually strips armors faster. I've talked about this before in an older older video, but since now we have this new mod, let's see how they would compare. Our test subject is not going to be a physical one, but instead a theoretical one, and we won't be considering other stuff, but only based on which would tear down that armor the fastest. We'll be using the Bombard, which has 500 base armor. I believe it is the highest armored normal enemy, if not mistaken, along with heavy gunners and napalms. We will also be using Lancers with 100 base armor and Butcher with only 5 base armor. And also all of them will be at a level 155, the highest that I could summon currently. If you were to remove 25% of its current armor every time you proc Corrosive, it will take you about 37 procs to reach below 0.5 armor, which should round down to 0 on a level 155 Bombard. That's because it would have about 16.3 thousand armor at the start. However, if you were to use the base armor reduction mods, which reduces the base armor by 12 every hit, you will need to hit it at most 42 times to remove all of its armor. The next scenario is with the Lancers. It is about 31 Corrosive procs versus 9 hits, and finally for the Butcher is about 21 procs versus 1 hit. You can see that it is much quicker with base armor reduction if the enemy is weaker, but slower if it's a heavy unit. Part of the reason is because Corrosive procs takes longer time to remove a small amount of armor relative to large amount, because it is in percentage. Just like if an enemy has 10,000 armor, it will just take 1 proc to remove 2.5 thousand armor. But if it only has 4 armor left, a Corrosive proc will only remove 1 armor. But a more interesting question is, what level would a common Bombard need to be in order for Corrosive proc to be more tedious for you to use overall? What I did to convenience myself here is to link the level and also armor scaling to my other spreadsheet, to this spreadsheet, and get the results immediately from calculations over at that spreadsheet. Then what we need to do is increase the Bombard's level over and over again until it takes 42 procs or more than 42 procs to reach below 0.5 armor, and we come down to about level 350. This means that any base 500 armor units with level higher than 350 will require more Corrosive procs than hits from Shattering Impact and the Amalgam armor reduction combo. Doing the same thing, but this time for the Lancers, we find ourselves in an opposite situation. Already, Corrosive is not as good as Shattering Impact and the new mod. So the question now is, how low must the Lancer be for Corrosive procs to be better at stripping armor than the 2 mod combo? Turns out the answer is never. Even at level 1, the 2 base armor reduction mods is still way better than trying to completely strip a Lancer with Corrosive. With that said, there's a lot of conditions which would flip the case of which being better. For example, why use Shattering Impact on a level 1 Lancer when most weapons with Corrosive will kill it instantly in 1 hit? Or when enemies are at level as high as 400, you'll probably get killed by 1 hit. So is using 2 base armor reduction mods and trying to melee the enemy like 40 times even a viable solution? You should also consider this whole spreadsheet shows you the numbers of proc versus numbers of hits of 2 different ways to remove armor. To create Corrosive procs every single hit is not as easy as you would think. You will need a weapon that can reach 100% status chance and only deals corrosive damage, which not many weapons could do. In other words, you'll most likely have to do more hits to cost more procs just to reach the amount of procs we discussed to fully strip armor. On the other hand, from what we have talked about before, since the new Amalgam Argonak mod works with damage over time as well, you'll most likely need way lesser hits to strip an enemy's armor. But the mod requires you to use the Argonak and a dagger, which also really limits your choice for your loadout. Especially if you want to use Shattering Impact 2, then that dagger needs to have impact damage as well. Another thing to note is that if enemy is using ferrite armor, corrosive damage will deal higher damage even if it doesn't strip armor as fast, so it still kind of redeems itself. Now when it comes to corrosive, you can use it on any weapon, but for the 2 base armor reduction mods, you need to hit the enemy with a dagger, and that is not easy, especially if you're fighting with a large boss or bosses with specific weak points. As you can see, there's so many conditions that could flip the outcome of which gets to be better. Not to mention, if you are going to use a dagger, you might as well go for a covert lethality build. To me, corrosive is just much more flexible than using a dagger. But how would a fully modded Zaw dagger do with 2 base armor reducing mods perform in a group of, let's say, level 155 heavy gunners? I really don't know because I don't have one, but I'm gonna make one and see if potentially it will become one of my favorite dagger builds. Now I'm going to end this video here, but on the next video we are going to talk about what happens when both corrosive and the base armor reduction mods were to use together. Hopefully I could finish my Zaw dagger by then and see if the new mod is even worth using. And I'll probably share something interesting in that video as well. Thanks so much for watching. I will see you guys in the next video. Tell me what you think down in the comments. Subscribe. Bye bye.